Well, good morning. Yes, I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this Monday morning. And yes, I did miss last Friday. So why don't we just go back a little bit further today, right? So let's look back at last Thursday. And the reason I want to do that is this trend that we've been talking about just continues. So that last Thursday, you look at the final 90 minutes or so of the trading sessions, and that's where we had the biggest move. You take a look over at the Dow, it was up 200 points in the final 90 minutes or so to be up 200 points. We actually watched the NASDAQ have a nice explosive move to the upside just to get out of that negative territory and finish into the green, and a really nice jump for them as well. So that's been the trend. Well, let's go to this past Friday with same sort of a story. Final hour or so of the day, we were already up a couple of hundred points on the Dow. It was a pretty strong day. You look over at the NASDAQ, it's trading well. But when you look at the final, call it 1 hour, maybe 50 minutes even or so, you look over at the Dow, it added another 250 points to finish up 450 points, a pretty substantial move to the upside on Friday. And the same thing with the NASDAQ, had a nice 160 points to add to the already strong day to finish up about 260 points they added to finish up about 160 points. So a really nice, strong move late in the session. So it was energy, it's technology, it's materials, it's healthcare. All of those were up about 2% or so. We had the volatility index, which was slipping back down once again. We're back in the teens. We're back towards that 19 area. We had a pretty decent range in terms of the volatility index. And oh, by the way, volume, which we bring up all the time, and I think is a very, very important point to each and every day to see how much participation and does it make a little bit more sense? Is there much to read through it? We had some huge volume once again, 41.5 million contracts on Friday. So you really look back and you're seeing this trend. Now, we did have a little bit of a slow start last week, but it seemed like we started to add a little bit more volume each and every day. Now, jumping into today, couple big news stories really out there today. The financials certainly seeing some disruption because of what was going on with the defaults and the margin calls and all of that. So that was one big storyline. Suez Canal. We finally look like maybe it's unlocked, right? And that's been an issue. And obviously, you take a look at the price of crude. Friday, we got up and over 60. Today, we were up and over about 61. And that's certainly affecting markets to some degree. You look over at the 10-year, that was relatively flat, at least early on. So the Dow starts off down about 170 points. I look over at the NASDAQ, it's down about 50 or 60 points. We actually rallied pretty nicely off of that. We got up to the open. We were closer to flat. NASDAQ was still a little down, but not a whole lot. 30 minutes into the day, we were still sitting in about the same spot. We're about flat, but we started to see the NASDAQ start to sell off pretty significantly. And you take a look over at tech, semiconductors, and biotech, and you'll see exactly what's going on. All three getting hit. Now, different degrees, but certainly the semiconductors, which have been so hot, a little bit of pressure on those today. And some of the bigger names out there, Tesla and some of those names moving to the downside by a few percentage points. And that is going to drag things down. So the financials, on the other hand, that was really the area we've seen the most pressure so far. And a lot of that having to do with what I was talking about with that headline. But you look over at Credit Suisse, down pretty significantly, about 11%. Goldman Sachs not down nearly as much. JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, all down. But you combine all of those together, you look at the financials, and you see that for the most part, they've been down about 1% for most of the first hour or so of the session. So that's something that stood out. I look over at biotech, I see a name like Moderna, and that's down. I mentioned Tesla already. So there is some pressure out there. Energy also, a little bit of pressure. So that part is getting neutralized out, at least to some degree, when I see the industrials and the materials and the consumer staples, some of those looking pretty decent. So let's get a really quick update. I'm curious myself. Down about 120 now on the Dow, down about 120 now on the NASDAQ. So that's kind of where, we started with some pressure on the markets. We had a little bit of relief. Now we're seeing that pressure come back down on the market. So I got two unusuals for you, and I'm going to get out of here. This week is an unbelievably great week. I've got a lot of free time. We've got a lot of different Zooms and so forth that are going on. We got the Market Rebellion. I'm really excited about what's going on this afternoon with our round table. Bill Fleckenstein, one of the greats, and you are going to really be in for a treat if you're able to tune into that right after the close today at 3 o'clock with Market Rebellion. So, unusual, Kratos Defense Company, aerospace. This really, really interesting. We don't see it that often, but we've seen it in the past, and it seems like the option paper has been pretty strong in terms of being right in the past. So we'll see if that continues to hold up. About 7,800 of the April 30 calls. Now the stock's trading a little bit below that. It's trading 26.45. So the stock's going to have to make a fairly substantial move in a fairly short period of time. But that's KTOS is the symbol there. People ask for those symbols all the time. 45 cents up to about 75 cents on that nearly 8,000 calls of the April 30s. Now, here's one that's really interesting to me because we talk about the stock all the time. You don't hear us talk as much about the options, but I'm going to tell you a little something about what we're seeing today in Apple. Now, Apple, early on, we had some April call buying, and that was something that's not terribly unusual, but we're starting to see that start to build up. What was unusual was going out into May. So the May 7th expiring, the 130 calls for Apple, AAPL. 120-170 is where the stock was trading. It might even be a little bit less expensive now because when I first saw this, I think the NASDAQ was trading much better than it is presently. So about 10,000 of these May 7 calls, or May 7 expiring 130 calls, they were going for about 220 to 240. Now, as I mentioned, they were already buying April's in front of that, but with this call, they were also selling the upside call, the 140 strike calls, to hedge this off a little bit, not as much money exposed, and then still capping a little bit of that upside as well by selling the 140. So always be conscious of that as well. What sort of, is this a direct, just this is the trade, or is it part of a spread? Is it part of a stock? Is it part of buy rights? Part of the puts is as part of a three-way? In this particular case, it looks like definitely a spread. So these May 7th expiring, the 130 calls against the 140s is what we were seeing there. 10,000 of those trading. Pretty decent size, even for Apple, pretty decent size to see that. So really excited about today. Hopefully you're going to be able to join us later on for the roundtable. That should be really great. Otherwise, have a great day of trading, and we'll see you tomorrow at the same time, 9:30, Market Rebellion, here live every day.